Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome to today's explainer. Now, I'm calling you the jury right off the bat today because, well, we're stepping straight into one of the most meticulously crafted, deceptive courtrooms in all of literature. We are cracking open Vladimir Nabokov's deeply controversial masterpiece, Lolita. And I gotta tell you, from the literal first page, we are dropped into a highly seductive trap set by a master illusionist. So our job in this explainer, figure out exactly how the trick works, and more importantly, what it's so desperately trying to hide.
Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. Just listen to the rhythm of that. It's gorgeous, right? Nabokov is intentionally using what we call euphony, basically just really beautiful, pleasing sounds. Those rolling, alliterative L's and the sharp tapping of the T's, they are deliberately designed by the narrator to completely enchant us. He even brags about it later, talking about the tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. It is stunning poetry, but that's exactly the danger. This rhythmic, hypnotic prose is designed to totally disarm you before you even realize whose mind you're trapped inside.
So let's get right into it with Section 1, the most seductive villain. The guy speaking those beautiful words is Humbert Humbert, and he is, by absolutely every definition, a predator. Yet he is such a master manipulator that when this book first dropped in the 1950s, a lot of early critics actually fell for his spell. No kidding, they got so tangled up in his words that they viewed his horrific, abusive crimes as this tragic romance. Some even tried to defend him as a guy corrupted by a femme fatale. So how on earth did he pull off such a massive, disturbing deception? Well, he did it by being the ultimate unreliable narrator. He presents this whole text as a fictional memoir, supposedly written from a psychiatric ward or a prison cell while he's awaiting trial. He's putting on this elaborate performance for his lawyers, the psychiatric staff, and crucially, for us, the jury. He uses this format to systematically justify his pedophilia, mask his crimes, and try to win our sympathy. He essentially wants us to buy into his biased point of view and ignore the absolutely terrifying reality of his actions.
Which brings us to Section 2, the spider's rhetorical web.
Now, the brilliant thing here is that Nabokov doesn't just let Humbert lie to us unchecked. He leaves these little textual breadcrumbs to expose his narrator's true predatory nature. If you look closely, Humbert frequently describes himself in ways that kind of slip past his own defenses. He literally calls himself an inflated pale spider and a white widowed male, which, by the way, is a super terrifying nod to the venomous black widow. He talks about waiting in his luminous web for his warm-colored prey. So all that fancy prose style, those beautiful words we just talked about, that's actually the sticky silk. It's a prismatic weave meant to trap this young girl, Dolores Hayes, and, frankly, to trap you, the reader, right along with her in his twisted version of events. We can actually view this whole trick through the lens of classical philosophy. Think about Plato. Plato viewed rhetoric as a really dangerous instrument of deceit, basically a tool used by sophists to instill false beliefs and effectively brainwash an audience. But Aristotle? He defended rhetoric as an art aimed at the truth, arguing that understanding persuasion is exactly how we recognize and refute bad arguments. In this novel, Humbert is 100% practicing Platonic deceit to hide his abuse. But the author, Nabokov, he is practicing Aristotelian rhetoric. He intentionally gives Humbert this incredibly persuasive, intoxicating voice precisely to test us. He's teaching us how to spot the lie, helping the careful reader uncover the really ugly truth buried beneath that beautiful surface.
Moving on to Section 3, Solipsizing Dolores Hayes.
If we're going to break this illusion, we absolutely have to look at the actual victim caught in this web. And to understand how Humbert attempts to completely erase the real young girl, we need to talk about a very specific, incredibly chilling word he uses. That word is solipsize. Now, in philosophy, solipsism is the idea that only your own mind is sure to exist. But Humbert takes that and turns it into a verb. To solipsize someone is the absolute denial of their right to exist as an independent human being. It's treating someone entirely as a projection of your own selfish desires. There's this awful moment early on where he actually boasts that he has safely solipsized his victim. He literally strips away all her humanity, her fears, her own consciousness, just to replace her with his fantasy creation, this mystical creature he dubs a nymphet. You can actually see this erasure happening right in the structure of his sentences. He writes, "She was low, plain low, in the morning. She was Lola in slacks. She was Dolly at school. she was Dolores on the dotted line. This is anaphora, the repetition of a phrase at the beginning of clauses. Humbert uses this rhetorical device to literally chop her identity up into these purely aesthetic, manageable little pieces. But he insists that in his arms, she is always Lolita, which is his invention. He's doing everything he can to hide the reality of a terrified, trapped child who, as the text very quietly reveals in these passing moments, silently cries into her pillow every single night. He just completely objectifies her. But here's where things get interesting. Section 4, cracks in the narrative.
Because despite Humbert's desperate, suffocating attempts to control the story, the silenced reality of Dolores Hayes actually begins to fight back. We can view this through a really cool literary concept by the theorist Mikhail Bakhtin called heteroglossia, which basically just means the presence of two or more distinct voices within a text. See, Humbert desperately wants a monologue. He wants to be the one and only voice dominating this narrative. But he fails. His singular version of events is constantly getting fractured and broken apart by the presence of other texts, other voices, and other realities that bleed into his manuscript and completely subvert his authority.
Just look at all the competing texts fighting for space in this novel. You've got tour books and road maps, Humbert's own hidden diaries, Claire Quilty's play The Enchanted Hunters, and Charlotte Hayes's letters. Dolores is so incredibly clever and resilient here. She takes these mundane items and weaponizes them to break Humbert's control. She uses tour books and road maps to secretly dictate their route across the country right under his nose. She uses the play The Enchanted Hunters to orchestrate her eventual physical escape. These texts represent her literal rebellion against his dominating pen. She forces her way into his discourse, proving once and for all that she cannot be completely erased.
Which leads us to our final takeaway, Section 5, the author's ethical test.
We've seen the illusion, we've seen the trap, and we've spotted the cracks in the facade. Now we arrive at the absolute climax of Nabokov's ultimate purpose in writing this. Early in the novel, Humbert very casually drops this incredible line. He says, "You can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose style." This single sentence hits the nail on the head. It perfectly demonstrates the deeply disturbing juxtaposition at the very heart of the novel. There is an extreme, highly intentional dissonance between Humbert's elevated, poetic, beautiful language and his monstrous predatory actions. Nabokov has basically created a monster of incuriosity, a man who is so obsessed with his own prose and his own desires that he completely, utterly ignores the profound suffering of the human being sitting right in front of him. Which leaves us, the jury, with one final haunting question. Did you look past the prose to see the reality? Nabokov's Lolita isn't just a story about a predator. It is an ethical test for the reader. It challenges us. It asks if we are easily seduced by a fancy prose style, or if we actually have the moral curiosity to read between the lines, to hear the muffled cries of a child, and to recognize the profound cruelty hidden right behind the mask of high art. It forces us to ask ourselves, did we fall for the illusionist's trick? Well, I hope this explainer has given you the tools to ensure you never do. Keep reading carefully, and I'll catch you next time.